hat. Ah, I know that music. Alex Shephard, do you know that music?
I do vaguely recall that music.
That music, my friends, is stock music from the old NFL film footage, and it should tell you that on this edition of Tomaskycast, senior editor Alex Shephard. Hi, Alex.
Hey, it's good to make my inaugural appearance on the Tomaskycast.
You got to speak up a little louder.
Oh, excuse me. I'm talking into a microphone, but I will speak up now.
There you go. We are talking about the Super Bowl, not just the game itself, but the zeitgeist around the Super Bowl. Alex, what do you say?
Well, I think I thought a good place to start would be the peculiar politics of this Super Bowl, in which the San Francisco 49ers, the team of not just Nancy Pelosi, but of America's most liberal city, a city that has become, in many ways, a symbol of democratic misrule and the crime and chaos that follows.
San Francisco in the words of Michael Schellenberger's book from recent vintage.
Yeah, and this is now the team of the right in a kind of peculiar and twisted way, not because their defensive end Nick Bosa is a diehard Trump supporter, but rather for extremely convoluted culture war reasons. And they're rejecting a team of America's heartland, the small market Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Very exciting team in a lot of ways. Again, for political reasons that seem pretty vague to me, relating to a massive multi-million-dollar Pfizer endorsement deal and for their starting tight end, Travis Kelce, and his alliance with Taylor Swift, or his relationship with Taylor Swift, which, yeah.
Alex, your mind has obviously been so captured by the deep state that you're not attuned to what the conspiracy that is unfolding here before our eyes. Or are you?
Well, I think, it's in many ways, it very well could be. The Pentagon has destabilized countries before.
Yeah.
It has, installed Joseph R. Biden in the presidency. So why not do it again?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing has been pretty fascinating to me, but it's mostly just completely tedious. And I think, in some ways it's reflective of, conservative media space that is so fixated on eking out any attention it can on anything that they'll just make stuff up. But it has become a really bizarre situation. And I think, in some ways it's a weird reversal of the argument during the Kaepernick years, to bring up the Niners again,
right,
that it was liberals that were, aggressively politicizing, our sacred monocultural depoliticized spaces. And the Super Bowl now has this kind of weird red-blue divide that has been completely artificially attached to it.
I was just going to mention Kaepernick because that was, and Trump was president and Kaepernick was the quarterback of the Niners, and that was a high water or low water cultural politics moment on the right. And then, of course, the other reversal is that Taylor Swift, they used to kind of like her, where she did country music, she was white, they didn't have anything bad to say about her a few years ago.
Well, the embrace of Taylor Swift was always, reactionary in the way that most right-wing cultural arguments are,
right.
In an era of let's just pick him out of a hat, Nicki Minaj, that Swift represented a kind of, white middle American virtue. And, especially after the Kanye West debacle of whatever that was, 2011, 2010. That she seemed like a kind of cultural redoubt, especially if you considered the sort of rise of hip hop, rap music, etc. And that is not the case now at all. But you still have this, and again, she endorsed Biden in 2020, but it's just weird because it's a totally grafted on argument. She hasn't said anything about politics, right? Travis Kelce, God love him, seems to be a very he's a wholesome doofus, you know what I mean?
Right,
like he's not following he's not gonna talk about the infrastructure bill or something, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't want to hear him on the Mideast situation. Actually, I'm not waiting around for that.
I don't know if he's condemned to Moss, actually, now that I think about it.
That's a good point. Yeah, hey, don't give Ben Shapiro any ideas. Yeah, I watched Andy Reid being asked that question yesterday. We're taping this Thursday, and Wednesday evening, I guess he was asked some question about this big conspiracy, and he just, he had nothing to say. I met Joe Biden at the White House, nice fella. That's all he had to say. He brushed it off. Uh, I do wonder what these guys think about being in this. So, I mean, how many of them I often think about this about football players as coaches. All these coaches are mostly right wing. I mean, we see that Tommy Tuberville is our example of that. He comes from coaching football to being the biggest idiot in the Senate. Uh, Even when I was young, I held out hope that Joe Paterno was a Democrat because he went to Brown, majored in literature, thoughtful guy. Then Newt Gingrich becomes Speaker of the House, and Joe Paterno and Lou Holtz threw his birthday party.
Yeah.
I will give Paterno credit, though, by saying that later on, he had a son who endorsed McCain and a daughter who endorsed Hillary and a son who endorsed Obama or something like that. He said, I taught my children to think for themselves. But 98% of these coaches are really right wing. Andy Reid seems like he actually maybe might not be. What do you think?
I think that these people, they worship at the altar of football, right? I
Yeah,
think it's one of our most psychopathic jobs as football coach.
yeah,
College football coaches maybe are most.
right.
I think obviously, yeah, there's a predilection, I think, for Republican politics, but in general, I think, uh, I'm in some ways, I think is particularly in the era, the post Kaepernick, era in which police brutality was obviously coming to the center. I think a lot of players started to think really deeply and I think cogently and intelligently about their role in American culture and also what their voice is on these type of events. I think that was both very powerful and in Kaepernick's case specifically, like very brave.
Yeah,
But I think for the most part, you know, they they're not engaged in politics and they shouldn't be, right? I think it's like a standard issue where, they are for the most part American men in their mid to late 20s.
yeah,
I don't know what the median age is. And like most American men in their mid to late 20s, they're not thinking particularly deeply about a lot of this stuff.
right.
And I think that the way that American culture works now thrusts them into that role in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable. But while I think it's funny to talk about Nick Bosa and Mason Rudolph and,
Yeah,
and the Trumpist wing of the NFL, I think for the most part, when you inject politics the way that it has been with a Super Bowl into it, it kind of feels weird because they don't care about any of this stuff, right?
yeah, right.
They want to hang out in Las Vegas this week,
Yeah. I will say this, and this may show my age, and you may disagree. I'll be interested if you do. But like when I see somebody score a touchdown and they, gamble into the end zone, and I see that it's written back there by the goalpost, "End racism,"
Yeah.
I think to myself, well, that's corporate and cheesy and all that stuff. But hey, at least it says "End racism." It could say something a lot worse than that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a reason why these moments they become flashpoints across the world, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
know you're not an English soccer fan or just a soccer fan in general, but the problem of racial abuse within those sports, but also racism within European countries itself has become a centerpiece in the wake of these types of protests as well. Like they've started a sort of global movement, and I think that is also very powerful, even if it has also, I think, for reasons partly related to the fact that it has been co-opted by,
yeah,
you know, um, really, evil organizations like the
yeah,
NFL. It's been kind of, bled of some of its significance, but it still obviously matters. And when you follow these things, it matters globally in a way that it didn't before. And I think there is a kind of, cross cultural alliance now between, you know, people talking about these issues in
yeah.
Serie A in Italy and in the NFL here and the NBA in particular, which has been a leader on this
Oh
front.
yeah, yeah, totally. I want people to know, by the way, I'm not anti-soccer. It's just like there's only so much time in a day.
This is
I
fun, but yeah,
followed
but soccer's on in the morning, so you just
yeah.
watch soccer and then you watch
Yeah,
the
okay.
NBA.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe I'll give that a roll. I do follow Spurs a little bit.
Ugh.
Now, the other sort of pop cultural meme that's taken whole pregame is this Tony Romo debate. Why don't you tell people what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tony Romo, when he started as a broadcaster in 2017, was, probably rightfully seen as the sort of future of the sport. He was, you'd seen this kind of shift towards more analysis, let's say, with Chris Collinsworth, the very chatty Chris Collinsworth,
Right.
maybe 5 or 6 years earlier, but Romo felt like the next development. He was somebody who was, aggressively into what was happening. He was constantly interjecting his own ideas about what would happen in a kind of Nostradamus-y
Yeah.
way. And I think for the first 3 years that he was on the broadcast, I think everyone loved it. And and rightly, praised him as a sort of rising star. He's still, I think, only 41 or something. But there has been a real backlash, I think, really, starting probably around 2021, but has reached a fever pitch now, and he will, be on the call this time. But, I think I've grown frustrated with his shtick, as have, a lot of other people more vocally. Are you a fan?
Fan might be overstating it, but I would say on balance, I'm still pro Romo. I mean, I do think that more often than not, when he says, Jim, watch for a screen here, it's a screen.
Yeah.
And his batting average at that seems pretty good to me. Uh, his personality doesn't bother me. I don't know. Jim Nance is kind of this neutral,
Yeah.
piece of, cardboard or something like that. And that's his shtick. So he needs somebody to add a little color to it. I think Romo does. So I was a little surprised to see this full flower of this anti-Romoism.
So
Uh,
I guess the Wall Street Journal did, and back in 2019, they did a numerical analysis, and they found that he was right at 68% when he was
68.
doing it,
Well,
which is pretty good.
that is pretty good.
Yeah, Ty
Yeah.
Cobb only hit 360 or something,
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, but I do think that that thing, especially when it gets wrong, I think it's just a kind of, we're maybe allergic to a certain level of put on enthusiasm. I mean, the other part of his style is a kind of inarticulate, wow type of
Right. Yeah.
interjection, and which is good. I think it's especially good when paired again with Nance's more traditional buttoned up style. But I think it does feel like there's, we've sort of moved past it. And I think the other issue, and Brian Curtis in The Ringer had, I thought, a really good piece about this. But one issue too is that maybe that Romo has just not grown enough, that he's still rooted in the experience as a quarterback, and he sees everything from the view of a quarterback, to the point that almost anyone else on the field becomes anonymous, right? He's
Mhm.
thinking about the secondary, but if you're an inside linebacker, or God forbid a left tackle or something, he
Yeah.
probably doesn't know who you are at all. And so I think the idea that, I think we were all taken with this idea in 2017, which, that you were seeing the game in a way that you wouldn't without Romo. And
Yeah.
I think now that's maybe less true. And I think for me, I'm an analytics obsessed person in a lot of ways, but I also kind of get frustrated a little bit with the graphification of sports analysis.
Yeah.
Sometimes I
Yeah.
want to hear about what something means, even if that is silly, and I just get tired of endless diagrams, like and when I think about the NBA, I think we've lost some of that. And, I know what an elevator screen is, but like, who
Yeah.
cares, right?
Do you have any living memory of John Madden?
Oh yeah, yeah, big time. He
Yeah.
was it's a real centerpiece of my childhood. So
Yeah. Yeah. So he was, for folks who don't know, I think he was the first one or among the first to have the telestream.
yeah, he was
Um,
the first, I think,
was the first. Yeah.
at least according to the somewhat hagiographic ESPN documentary that came out a couple
Yeah.
of years ago.
Right.
Yeah,
I see. I never was crazy though about Madden. I mean, his real claim to fame was that he made these noises. He said, "Here comes the guy, Galump," and he goes, "Oh, poof, poof,"
yeah,
and that's what was his brand. But he and Summerall, they never told you like the down and how many yards there were to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They just weren't very good basic announcers. They never said it was 3rd and 12. This was before it said 3rd and 12 up in the corner,
Yeah.
if you can imagine such a day existing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that now this is all getting put on Greg Olson, that he's going to be kind of the next savior of the other guy, right? Because he's going to be with Tom Brady next year, which
Oh,
we'll
right, yeah.
see how that works out. But it generally, much like I feel like the backlash to Taylor Swift is going to come with this next album. That with Romo, he probably got overinflated in those first few years. And now people are mostly seeing him for what he is. I liked a line uh in in Brian Curtis's piece in The Ringer where he said, "For me, Romo is a TV version of a very talented but very flawed NFL quarterback, which Romo was once upon a time. What makes Romo unique isn't that he's elite or terrible. He's both at the same time. I believe he changed NFL broadcasting, that he created a style that people in distant countries could appreciate. But other announcers have shown that they can study that style and be even better." And that's, I think, where people are looking at Olsen now, too.
Yeah, I think that's right. We'll talk about the game in a few minutes here, folks. Don't worry. But what are your the happiest and most crushing Super Bowl memories? I have a feeling I know the answer to the second question.
Well, I thankfully am just barely young enough that I do not remember the 4 Super Bowls
Yeah,
that the Buffalo. I am a Buffalo Bills fan.
yeah,
So for me, my version of that was the game against the Chiefs in the divisional round, dude, what,
yeah.
3 years ago now, um, and which we will probably talk about when we turn to the game in a second. It was strange for me when I first moved to New York in 2012. My closest friends were all New England Patriots fans. Um, and so I have memories of, watching the Patriots lose in the Super Bowl would be great. And I would get to be a little troll, which I love.
Yeah.
But, it's still hard. I do still think the best individual games I saw, I mean, my favorite was, golly, what year was it? Patriots 28, Seahawks 24, right? Which I think just
Oh,
had the
yeah.
best. I missed, the only one I've missed was the Giants Patriots game in 2008 when I was on a plane.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah,
yeah, but
that's a good one.
yeah, I've heard good things about it, but I've
Yeah,
never watched it.
yeah,
The Falcons comeback game, I sort of wanted Belichick to go to the Falcons just because I thought there would be some poetry there.
yeah,
But that game, despite the comeback, has never been as good for me. But in
yeah.
the recent ones that I can remember, those are 2 of my favorites.
Well, I'm so ancient, folks. I don't remember Super Bowl one or Super Bowl two, but I do remember Super Bowl three. And that's one of the most iconic Super Bowls of all time. That's when the Jets, as 18-point underdogs, beat the Baltimore Colts. The Jets from as they said, the upstart of the AFL, beat the mighty Colts from the old traditional NFL. And I remember watching it. I remember my dad had some friends over, and they were all Colts fans, and they're conservative. Well, my dad was a very liberal man, actually, but conservative, culturally.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, man, Namath, Jets, Jets, Jets." And they laughed at me. And who was laughing 3 hours later? And then I was a fan the next year of the Chiefs. The Chiefs were my real favorite team when I was a kid. I liked Len Dawson and Otis Taylor and
Yeah.
Willie Lanier and that whole crew. But yeah, more recently, that Giants win. That guy, that David, whatever his name was, made that catch.
David Tyree. Yeah.
Yeah.
NFL legend David Tyree. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really something. Anyway,
Syracuse University's finest.
oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. He probably had something to do with beating West Virginia at some point. um, yeah. So, okay. Talk about Sunday.
I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think that the Chiefs are going to win, which I have mixed feelings about. I mean, the whole game to me has been a little bit of a letdown, I guess. I mean, I was, of course, hoping for a Bills-Lions Lake Erie Super Bowl that I'm sure the ratings would have been fantastic for. And then was rooting for a Ravens-Lions Super Bowl. And, now here we are with, a repeat of what was a fine 2020 Super Bowl that I've basically memory hold because of what happened a month later.
Yeah.
Um, I just this Chiefs team, I was trying to think of what they remind me of, and what they remind me of is the Michigan team that won the NCAA championship this year.
Yeah.
I think that they are a flawed team in a lot of ways, but they have taken coverage of the flaws are slightly different, but they've taken coverage of those flaws as a real kind of motivating force, to the point that despite the fact that, they are led by someone who is certainly already in the conversation of greatest quarterback of all time, he obviously doesn't have anyone to throw to who isn't Travis Kelce. We'll talk about that in a
Right.
second. But the Niners, I am haunted still. I was in California's Central Coast, for Christmas,
Uh,
during Christmas dinner, looking over, watching them get absolutely destroyed by the Ravens, just picked apart. I think that there are real flaws in this Niners team, despite the fact that I think on both sides of the ball, they're probably technically more talented.
they're the favorites. They're 2.5 point favorites.
The
Uh,
Niners or the Chiefs are.
the Niners are.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I
Yeah,
think if you
yeah,
look at it like that, and again, like you think about McCaffrey, Yazek, Ayuk, Samuel, Kittle, that's something.
right.
But the problem is like, well, there's another guy on that team, and his name is Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
They kind of are this generation. Every generation gets the Joe Flacco that they deserve, and he feels like he's in that zone, like he is exactly good enough to win a Super Bowl, but is that going to be enough? I just don't know.
Uh, I think it'll be a close game. I do think Chiefs, and not because of Patrick or Travis or even Taylor, but the defense. I mean, the defense has played so well over the playoffs, and they played three pretty high octane offenses, right? Miami, Baltimore, and Buffalo, and they checked them all pretty well. I mean, I don't remember how many points each one scored, but Miami was single digits and Buffalo was 14 or 17.
17, I think.
17
We
and
won't talk
and,
about that.
and sorry.
That's okay.
Baltimore was around that. So, I mean, they're not like a completely dominating defense like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s.
Yeah.
But they're close to them. They like get stops and they make the other team, they stop drives and they get sacks and
Yeah.
they get a timely turnover, and they just then you look up at the end of the game and the other team has 13 points.
Yeah, I mean the Bills scored 24, but especially in the
Uh-huh.
second half when they dominated the ball, it never felt like
Right.
they never felt dangerous in the way that the Bills feel dangerous, right? It was,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think like Spagnuolo just has that kind of like chaos ball approach, and the other thing with the Niners too is um they remind me of, something that Carlo Ancelotti, the manager of Real Madrid, said about playing Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, where he just said, like they're easy to play because you know exactly how they're going to play, right?
Hmm.
They have a set style, and that you know exactly what the Niners are going to do. They obviously have all of these weapons, but I think that they, as you said, they've neutralized all of these teams, and yeah, even in that painful second half against the Bills, it always felt like, Allen could manage the clock. He could get these, little 8-yard passes here and there, but like every time they tried to go downfield, it just didn't matter at all. I mean, my one question with them is just that I think that their run defense has been pretty bad for most of the season.
Yeah.
And obviously, Christian McCaffrey
Right.
is pretty good at
It's
running the
pretty good.
football. Yeah.
Yep.
And that could be it could be an issue. But the other thing too is, I think you saw this in the Ravens game. Like aside from Trent Williams, that 49ers offensive line is like kind of meh.
Yeah.
And I think that, that kind of the complex, I mean, I love the Chiefs defense, but they just run these kind of crazy schemes.
Yeah.
And I think, Purdy has shown that if you give him time to think, that he is a perfectly capable quarterback. But if you take that away from him, he's Brock Purdy, he's not that good.
So you have a score?
27-20 Niners. Or sorry, 27-20 Chiefs, I think.
Okay, we're right next to each other. I got 28-17 Kansas City.
Yeah. That seems to
Um, yeah. Where are you going to watch it, and what are you going to eat?
I am gonna be in Orlando, so I'm not sure, but probably a bar somewhere with a bunch of people who work for Disney. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't. The one question is, yeah, I'm skeptical even of chicken wings, and as a proud Western New Yorker, you know, chicken wings outside of Western New York just aren't the same. But I'll
Yeah.
probably try some Florida wings. I'm just gonna try to eat as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I'll be here in this house in suburban Washington, D.C. and yeah, probably eating something uncreative like chicken wings too. Chili dogs, maybe. Maybe it's a good day for
Actually
chili
sounds good.
dogs. Yeah. All right, Alex Shephard. People should also read Alex's more serious writings at TNR.com and in the magazine. And hey, good chat.
Good chat.